You've probably heard it 1,000 times. Work harder and you'll get rich. Put in the hours, climb the ladder, and success will follow. But here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to admit. Working harder alone won't make you rich. In fact, for most people, the harder they work, the further away wealth becomes. This isn't a motivational speech designed to make you feel good about doing nothing. It's the opposite. Understanding why effort alone fails is the first step toward building actual wealth. Let me explain what's really happening. When you trade your time for money, you've entered into an agreement with severe limitations. Your earning potential is capped by the hours in a day. There are only 24 hours available, and you need to sleep for roughly 8 of them. That leaves 16 hours maximum for everything: work, eating, exercise, relationships, and personal development. If you're working 12 of those hours, you're left with just 4 hours for everything else in your life. This is the fundamental trap of active income. The more hours you work, the less time you have to build anything that doesn't require your personal presence. Let me paint a picture. Imagine 2 people, Sarah and Marcus. Sarah works as a consultant. She's excellent at her job. She works 50, sometimes 60 hours a week. She's exhausted. She gets home late, orders takeout, and collapses into bed. She repeats this 5 days a week. Meanwhile, Marcus works 40 hours a week at a stable job. He's competent, but not exceptional. The difference is what he does with his remaining time. While Sarah is grinding at the office, Marcus is reading books about investing. He's learning about real estate. He's studying how businesses operate. He's talking to investors and entrepreneurs about how they built their wealth. 5 years later, Sarah has earned more total money through her consulting work. She's made maybe $100,000 more than Marcus. But Marcus is wealthy. He owns 3 rental properties. He has a diversified investment portfolio. He gets monthly dividends. Meanwhile, Sarah still trades her time for money. She's made more, but she's not rich. The difference isn't that Marcus is smarter. It's that he understood a fundamental principle. Your income has a ceiling when you're the product being sold. Wealth isn't built on effort. Wealth is built on leverage. Leverage is using something other than your personal effort to generate income. This could be capital, meaning money that works for you in the market. It could be systems, meaning businesses or processes that function without requiring your constant presence. It could be influence, meaning an audience or platform that generates income. It could be intellectual property, like music, books, or courses. The wealthiest people in the world aren't the ones working the hardest. They're the ones who figured out how to make money while sleeping. Consider this reality. Jeff Bezos doesn't personally package any Amazon boxes. He doesn't write code. He doesn't answer customer service emails. Yet he's one of the richest people alive. Is he working hard? In a sense, yes. He's strategizing and making critical decisions. But he's leveraging millions of employees and an enormous system to generate wealth. His personal effort is multiplied through infrastructure. That's leverage. Compare this to a warehouse worker who works overtime every week. They're working significantly harder in terms of physical effort, but their effort isn't leveraged. They're just trading hours for dollars. Here's another uncomfortable truth. Some of the richest people you know probably don't work very hard at all. I'm not talking about inheritance wealth, though that's certainly a form of leverage. I'm talking about entrepreneurs, investors, and business owners who built their wealth through understanding leverage. Many of them work 30 hours a week, if that. They've structured their lives and businesses so that money flows in even when they're not actively working. They've invested in assets that appreciate and generate returns. They've built systems that operate without their constant input. This isn't laziness, it's intelligence about how wealth actually accumulates. The problem with the hustle culture narrative is that it conflates income with wealth. They're not the same thing. Income is money flowing in on a regular basis. Wealth is what you own that generates future income without requiring your effort. You can have a high income and be poor if you spend everything you make. You can have a lower income and be wealthy if you invest the surplus and let it compound over time. This is where the real power of getting rich lies. In the gap between what you earn and what you spend, invested wisely over decades. Let's talk about what actually builds wealth. First, you need income. That part is real. You can't invest what you don't earn. So having a good job or business that pays you well is important. But here's where people get it wrong. They think maximizing income is the primary lever. It's not. The primary lever is understanding where your money goes and directing it toward assets instead of consumables. An asset is something that generates future income or appreciates in value. A consumable is something that provides temporary satisfaction and then disappears. When you buy a house that you live in, that's a consumable in terms of wealth building, even though real estate is an asset class. The house doesn't generate income for you. It costs you money in property taxes, maintenance, and mortgage interest. But when you buy a rental property, that's an asset. Tenants pay you rent that covers your expenses and generates profit. The property appreciates over time, you're building equity and generating passive income. Same asset class, completely different wealth implications based on how you use it. This is why people who work the hardest often end up the furthest from wealth. Their income rises, but so does their lifestyle. They get a raise, they upgrade their apartment, or buy a nicer car. They earn more, so they spend more. Their income rises from $50,000 to $100,000, and their expenses rise from $45,000 to $95,000. Which means less capital to deploy toward assets that could generate passive income. The harder they work, the more they spend, and the further away wealth becomes. The path to wealth requires a fundamental shift in how you think about your time and money. You need to develop what I call a wealth mindset, and it's the opposite of a hustle mindset. A hustle mindset says more hours equals more money. A wealth mindset says more leverage equals more money. A hustle mindset glorifies busyness. A wealth mindset respects time. A hustle mindset measures success by how exhausted you are. A wealth mindset measures success by how much passive income you generate. Here's what this actually looks like in practice. You have a job that pays you well. $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 a year. You live frugally relative to your income, not miserly, but conscious. You save 20, 30, sometimes 40% of what you earn. You invest that money into income-generating assets, rental properties, dividend-paying stocks, index funds, bonds, or even a business that operates somewhat independently. You educate yourself constantly about how markets work, how real estate works, how businesses scale. You're not working more hours. You might be working fewer hours than your peers because you're focused on efficiency rather than effort. But you're building leverage systematically. Year 1, you're barely generating passive income, maybe $500 a month. But you're building the foundation. Year 3, it's $2,000 a month. Year 5, it's $5,000. Year 10, your passive income exceeds your active income from your job. Congratulations, you're financially independent. You can work if you want to, but you don't have to. This is the path to actual wealth, and it has nothing to do with working harder. It has everything to do with working smarter and investing the surplus consistently over time. The reason this message doesn't resonate with most people is because it requires patience and delayed gratification. Working harder gives you results immediately. You work more hours, you get a bigger paycheck. It's tangible and quick. Building passive income streams and investing wisely is slow. You might not see significant returns for years. Your brain, which evolved for immediate survival, rebels against this. It wants the paycheck today, not the passive income in 10 years. But patience is precisely where most people fail, and it's why most people never build real wealth. There's also a social component to this. Our culture celebrates the busy, the hardworking, the sleep-deprived entrepreneur. We tell stories about people who worked 80 hours a week to build their empire, but we ignore the survivor bias in those narratives. For every person who worked 80 hours a week and became rich, there are hundreds who worked 80 hours a week and burned out or failed. And for every burned out worker, there's an investor somewhere making exponentially more money with a fraction of the effort. We just don't celebrate that story because it's not as dramatic. So what should you actually do? If you want to build wealth, here's the framework. First, develop a skill or business that generates good income. This is where effort does matter. You need to be competent at something valuable. But second, and this is crucial, live below your means. Create a margin between what you earn and what you spend. Educate yourself about how to invest. You don't need to become a professional investor, but you need to understand the basics of how assets work. Fourth, invest that margin consistently into assets that generate returns. Real estate, stocks, bonds, or businesses. Fifth, give these investments time to compound. Don't expect to be rich next year. Expect to be significantly wealthier in 10 years if you execute this plan consistently. The final piece of this puzzle is understanding that once you have enough passive income to cover your expenses, you have something most people never achieve. You can choose to work because you want to, not because you have to. You can take risks. You can start businesses you believe in. You can take time off. You can travel. You can pursue interests that don't make money. This freedom is what wealth really buys you. It's not the luxury car or the vacation home. It's the freedom to spend your time on what matters to you, rather than what pays the bills. Working harder won't make you rich, but working strategically, investing your surplus, understanding leverage, and exercising patience will. It's not a quick fix. It's not a shortcut. It requires discipline and delayed gratification. But it works. And unlike working yourself to exhaustion, it actually leads to the life you probably wanted in the first place. One where you have both time and money, where your effort multiplies through leverage, and where you can choose how you spend your days. That's wealth, and it's absolutely within your reach if you're willing to think differently about how money and time actually work.